Shane Warne, thank you very much for your time today. One of the biggest names in cricket, obviously one of the greatest bowlers of all time, a former Australia captain. We're talking to you about something slightly different today, how you've used your name and cricket for various other brands and products that you've worked with. When you were first starting out, how did you decide which brands you wanted your name to be associated with?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me. It's an honour and a privilege to be here. Look, it's a good question. I've been very lucky and fortunate over the best part of 30 years to be involved in lots of different businesses and sponsorships over the years. But at the start, I got a really good piece of advice from my then captain, Alan Border, when there wasn't much money around in the late 80s and early 90s in sport. But off-field, you could make a little bit more money. For instance, my contract at Cricket Australia for playing and representing Australia was $3,000. So, by the time it doesn't go very far even back then. So sponsorship was a really important part of sportsmen back then. So being a brand has sort of evolved over that 30 years. And I've been lucky enough to have a very good, successful brand at the moment and over these many years of that as well. So at the start, it was lots of bits and pieces would come through until I really sort of established myself to launch Nike in Australia, which is a huge brand. And through that, I got the opportunity to meet guys like shot commercials with Bo Jackson, Michael Jordan, and met Phil Knight, the owner, and etc. Then there was Just Jeans campaigns which was good because it broadened me not just as a cricketer. I signed with Just Jeans, which put me on a different scale where suddenly I had to walk down a runway, which I had no idea how to do. And I was doing it with Helena Christensen and Claudia Schiffer. And a funny story, I spoke to Helena Christensen at that stage as we're walking down and she's strutting her stuff. And I'm sort of walking down looking at these new Just Jeans shirts and jeans and everything. And I said, geez, it's a long walk. And she said, don't talk. And I was like, okay, sorry. And then after we did the twirl at the end and got back, she said, don't ever talk to me. Don't ever do that. And I was like, okay, I got it. And then we were fine after that. So I just didn't understand. So I was lucky enough early on because I suppose I had a big impact onto the world game and it was something different than just fast bowling for so many years, that I wasn't just cricket bats and cricket balls. I was lucky enough to have a more global endorsement and my brand was becoming stronger. So things like Nike and Just Jeans and a few other things that flowed on after that, I was very, very lucky. So that was a huge part of my involvement of understanding that side of things rather than just cricket. That sponsorship was suddenly a huge part of it, and being a brand was very, very important, and the things you need to do to protect that brand. And the Alan Border message I had that he gave me early was, if you do well on the field, everything else will look after itself. And that was sort of great advice. Then it's about who do you associate yourself with? And I think for me, I've never just taken money, no matter how much it was, to endorse a brand. I really had to believe in it. I had to use it or thoroughly believe in it, and it had a benefit for everybody else. Or it was a huge global brand that was good for me to be part of and agree with everything they stood for. So I've been very lucky, touch wood, over the years that things have been pretty good on that side of things.
It's unusual, I suppose, as well back then for sports people to look at the wider audience. But you mentioned Nike in there, which was a huge deal. You were the first cricketer to work with them, I believe. How much did that change things for you? And particularly because you were associated with Michael Jordan and Tiger Woods, who have become friends. How much did that all change things for you?
Yeah, it was huge. I mean, getting flown to Portland, Oregon to meet Michael Jordan and in later years, as you mentioned, Tiger Woods and becoming friends with him. Bo Jackson, who was a terrific athlete. To work with those guys, been introduced in the Nike campus as our global new partner, Shane Warne, in Australia. We're using him to launch our brand into Australia back in 93, 94, I think it was. It was an amazing experience to do that. And back then, as you say, there wasn't really... Cricket wasn't as big as it is now. Cricket now has been just been voted somewhere out of America as the second most popular sport in the world. And I think there was 10 or 15 different elements to what they put into there, whether it be sponsorship on the global game, TV rights, players sponsorship, etc., etc., etc. And there was football/soccer for us Australians, and then cricket was second. So it's become such a huge part of the world global sporting landscape. And for me, back 25 years ago, to be part of that sort of scratching the surface time and getting paid some pretty big bucks for back then, and being the face of a huge brand like Nike was exciting. And getting flown around to do commercials with arguably one of the greatest ever sportsmen in Michael Jordan, who didn't love The Last Dance. I thought it was outstanding. And Bo Jackson, to see what he did in both football and baseball was unbelievable. So to have that exposure at 23, 24 years of age on a worldwide scale was a huge eye-opener for me and held me in good stead for the rest of the years gone that went past.
There wasn't much pay when you started out, as you mentioned, $3,000 a year. Was there much of a conflict of team sponsorship and brands? Because we've seen that in quite a lot of sports. I think in 1996, particularly, yes, there was an issue there, wasn't there?
Yeah, good knowledge. In 96, my Cricket Australia contract had skyrocketed to a $30,000 12-month contract, enormous pay jump from 3,000 to 30. But the 96 World Cup, we were sponsored by Powerade, which was owned by Coca-Cola. And the World Cup in 96, major sponsor was Pepsi. So this was sort of the first time a cricketer had a conflict with a team's major sponsor and a tournament's major sponsor, because Pepsi had offered me $150,000 US to do a one-day shooting for a Pepsi commercial with Sachin Tendulkar and Carl Hooper. And the processes that went through, then the conversations went something along the lines like this. Well, you guys paid me 30 grand and 150,000 US is nearly just over 200,000 Australian. So that's like playing 7 years for Australian cricket. I've got a decision here to make. And they said, well, who else are you going to play for? And I said, right. Because back then, there wasn't these T20 competitions. There wasn't really any money outside of international cricket. So I had a real dilemma, and a decision I had to make was, how am I going to, obviously this is a huge amount of money for an individual for that I was getting so far, to playing cricket. So in the end, there was a compromise that happened, and I was allowed to actually do that commercial while still playing cricket for Australia. So the good news is that common sense actually came through, which is very rare. But it was great that the Cricket Australia allowed me to do that.
And it's interesting now, because you're on the other side of that. Money and earning money is in a slightly different bracket, I presume, in your priorities. So how does that change which brands you now want to work with? Because it won't be about necessarily the money.
No, exactly. As I said earlier, everything hasn't always been about the money. I would much prefer to align myself with a brand that I believe in, rather than if, let's say Colgate and McLean's, for instance. If McLean's offered me more money, but I enjoy Colgate more, I would go with Colgate. I wouldn't just take the money. And I've always done that through my whole life. But now it's about businesses, it's about investments, about upside, about all those different things, and trying to have your finger in a lot of different pies. So I'm very lucky at the moment where I've got my TV commentary that I do in the UK, I do in Australia, and occasionally for World Cups and international events, wherever they're held, for the governing body. I've got some investments in the IPL. I own 3% of the Rajasthan Royals. I'm team mentor and brand ambassador for the Rajasthan Royals in the IPL, which is a huge brand. It's just massive what's going on here. To put in context, the first IPL match here in Dubai had over 200 million eyeballs watching the first game. So just to put that in context in the world, I think it's bigger than the Super Bowl. So that just understands the reach that the IPL has. They're talking about the TV rights going for $8 billion for a 6-week tournament in next year. So the money here for some of the players and the reach that the IPL has is huge. So to be part of that as well is good. Head coach of the London Spirit out of Lords, which is a really good brand to be associated with, probably the home and the spiritual home of what cricket is, the home of cricket at Lords. So to be the head coach there is exciting. Then I've got my own gin label, which we've been winning some global awards. We just won the SIP Awards in San Francisco We've won some gold medals in Australia and Asia, and we won a silver medal in Europe. I've had my own fragrance out at the moment, which has gone sold out. So I'm very lucky that I've got a bit of cricket, a bit of business side of things. I've got some investments, etc. All the things that we spoke about, plus some sponsors that I've had, and for a long period of time, like Advanced Hair Studio. And how good's my hair looking, by the way? Pretty cool. So I've been very, very lucky, touch wood, on that side of things, that I've made the right decisions. And I think it's really important that to have the right people around you too, because there's too many people out there that just are out for themselves. They're looking for a quick buck and not thinking of the athlete themselves. So for me to have guys like Michael Cohen and James Erskine in Australia looking after me, and Andrew Neofutu as well, I've got some really good people around me, some great mentors. I used to have the late Kerry Packer. Unfortunately, he's no longer with us. Lloyd Williams from Australia, James Packer now. So I've got plenty of good business people, great mentors. I've got my fingers in a few pies. I've got some great things going on. So it's exciting times. And I think I'm very, very lucky to be in this position.
A few pies. You could open a pie shop, Shane. The hair looks great. And I did want to ask you about that, because some subjects are very personal. You've talked about hair loss. You've talked about the Advanced Hair Studio. Was it a hard decision for you to be so public with that?
Yeah, but I thought the reason I said yes is a friend of mine was already, Greg Matthews and Graham Gooch. They had sort of dipped their toe in the water with Advanced Hair Studio. And I mean, it's sort of, when you start even say the words, it's sort of, people start to smile and think, oh, but that's part of it, to break down those barriers and help inspire people to maybe that it affects their life. So for instance, for me, I didn't want to really admit I had a problem and I didn't like going bald. Some people don't care, which is fine. And some people do. And I did. So in my situation, for instance, when I bowled a ball, the camera was always on the back of your head. And the problem I had, my crown was going bald. So I spoke to Greg Matthews and said, mate, is there anything you can do about this? And so he put me in touch with the guys at Advanced Hair. I then struck up a great relationship with the founder, Carl Howe. And he said, look, we'd love to help you. We can regrow your own hair. And that was 2003, 4. So, 16 years ago, 17 years ago. And I've been helping them since. And since then, I've had so many cricketers that are from all the countries who come and say, I can't believe you did that. I'm so nervous. Do you reckon that'd help me? So I've been able to help guys like Jacques Callis, who now is not afraid to say, yep, Advanced Hair helped me. There's so many others, AB de Villiers. I mean, I could go on and on and on. AFL players. There's so many sports for now feel it's okay. It's okay. So if I've been able to help inspire people to say it's okay, there's so many issues that we can talk about on a world scale. Mental, I mean, open a can of worms. We talk about, Black Lives Matter, racism, mental health, and we could go on and on and on. There's so many issues going on that we can talk about. This is one of the issues that people can actually affect the way they live their life by hair loss. I know that might sound strange, but it means they wouldn't go out. They won't socialize. They'll wear a hat all the time. They're so self-conscious of it. So if I can help people out there have a better mental health and better state of mind, and they're more happy with their appearance, which gives them more confidence, then that makes me feel pretty happy.
Yeah, no, it does hugely affect people's mental health. I think that's something a lot of people understand. And on the charity side as well, your fragrance, which you mentioned a little earlier, that has all the proceeds going to charity. Why did you decide to do that? And also from the process of it, how interesting was it choosing the right smell? Because I imagine that's a fascinating process.
Yeah, it is. It's really good, actually. So try and keep this short. The process was basically a big company in Australia called Chemist Warehouse that basically sells 85% of Australian fragrances from all over the world would come out of Chemist Warehouse. So when they approached me to say, because of what's been happening in the world, we'd love to do a fragrance with you with all the proceeds and all profits going to a particular charity. And I've worked with lots of charities over the years. And one of the people that we both had in common and both have supported was a charity called My Room, which was children with cancer. Obviously, there's been so many things that have been and affected so many people with this pandemic about just small businesses. We could go on and on and on how it's affected people financially, mental health issues as well. But charities is something that's been really hurt because unable to hold any events whatsoever. So Margaret Zeta, who does a great job down there in Melbourne with My Room, we teamed up with Chemist Warehouse and with Margaret. We said all the profits, every single cent will go directly to My Room. The good news is we sold out in about 3 weeks. We sold out of the AW2020 fragrance and raised just over $200,000, which has been awesome to be able to do that. The process from it was basically with Chemist Warehouse, I said, what are your favourite fragrances? So I chose my 3 or 4 favourite fragrances, gave that to them. They then said what the families of those fragrances and smells were from. They gave me then 12 samples out of New York. I smelled all those. I wore them around for a bit, worked out which ones I liked. I then took them back to Chemist Warehouse. They did their thing with it, and we came up with the fragrance and the smell. And then we had to come up with the packaging, which we did together. And it was a great eye-opener of how it worked, when we just normally go through duty-free or something like that and say, that smells nice, I'll have some of that. So to understand the processes and how it all works and how much work goes into producing a fragrance was really exciting. And to have your own fragrance is pretty cool, especially when it smells good. And I'm surprised you can't smell me through the phone. I get a bit closer.
I don't have smell-o-vision.
But yeah, it was great. And be able to help out charity as well was a fantastic thing for us all to do.
We all know we're in a global pandemic at the moment. That's why you're stuck in a hotel room there. But that also means that investment for a lot of small businesses and for companies is hugely important at the moment. So how did you decide to bring your influence and your attention to a particular product? And I know you have invested in 708 Gin, but how do you make those decisions these days?
Yeah, well, it's not easy. You rely on a lot of the people around you, as I said, because there are a lot of different offers that come to you. Some that are a bit wacky and a bit out there, and you go, well, thanks, but no thanks. Others rely on you with a potentially a big upside, but maybe a big investment. Some are a smaller investment for a smaller upside. Some, there's a trade-off between, if you help us use your name, we'll give you X percentage of the business, and you sort of put it in that way. So there's those sort of things that you weigh up. But I always stick to things that I believe in and I think can help everyone, or it's something that I believe works or has helped me. So, for instance, with the gin, with the gin stuff that I've been doing with 708, they approached me. I tried the gin. I thought, you know what, this is fantastic. And we were able to help during the pandemic. One of my partners, for instance, is a leading eye surgeon. So he was seeing firsthand in hospitals how much hand sanitizers was so tough to get and how important they were in hospitals sanitizing everyone's hands. So we stopped production of our gin, produced hand sanitizers for free, and donated them to the Western Australian hospitals. So to be involved with what they stood for, and a delicious brand. So the gin we have is winning awards because of not because in San Francisco, because Shane Warne's got his name to it, he's a cricketer. They had no idea about that. This was a blind taste test. So to have that sort of, I tasted the product, liked the product, loved the people that were involved and what they were doing, and thought it was a great opportunity. So I invested in that with my own money because I believe in it, and we think we've got a great product that people will enjoy.
I think turning a gin factory into hand sanitizing is probably a perfect way to finish, considering the kind of world
I think a few of the guys were trying to drink the hand sanitizer, which wasn't ideal.
Yeah, maybe you shouldn't get too confused about that. But Shane Warne, it's been fascinating talking to you about all of those different subjects. Thank you.
No worries. Thank you very much for having me. Have a great time, and look forward to seeing you all soon.